Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Councilors at the table, Councilor Hogan, Monto, Green, and President Helen Hudson, myself, Rita Paniagua. So we're here to talk about the HR, about the HR program. If you can take us through it, and we'll just ask you questions as we go along.
Absolutely. So I've got a couple more prints coming. Our copier is a little bit slow, but so Tracy will be here any moment with a copy for all of council. But to start things off, so we engaged HR Works out of Rochester for this program. The slides that you'll be getting kind of explain who HR Works is. So the first page kind of introduces the consultant we worked with and the VP. The second page gets into the situation summary, so essentially what we provided them, the issue that we had and we were finding. From there, it talks a little bit about HR Works, who they are, what they do, kind of the services they provide. It gets into a project outline, so it talks about the scope of the project, the high-level requirements, and essentially the outcomes. From there, it gets into their project implementation, which is a 7-phase project. It talks about everything from strategic planning all the way through the ongoing support that they're continually providing us up through now. Then there is a presentation that we presented probably 2 months ago now about establishing equitable pay systems, and it's not specific to the city, but it is what they did. So that goes through everything from establishing a philosophy and policy around comp, analyzing the jobs, creating the salary benchmarks, establishing pay grades, establishing pay equity and pay gap analysis, then implementation and the ongoing maintenance. Yes.
Can I ask something before you move
Sure.
too far forward? So
Absolutely.
Did you just mention, or maybe I understood wrong, that the benchmarks are not relative to the city? Is that what you just said?
In what sense? Not relative to the city.
You said it. That's my question. In what sense?
In what sense is it relative to the
Is it
city?
not relative to the city than what they gave us? Isn't that what you just said?
No. It's not that it's not relative. It's a generic, this is what a pay study is. So these are the steps they did, but it's not as specific as the first parts of the contract that explain the steps that they took. Or the first part is customized to us. This is the engagement that we're taking part in. This is a generic, this is what comp studies do, this is what we're going to do for the city. So comp studies shouldn't vary. It should be a generic outline that we're going through.
So because it's generic is why it's not relative.
It's relative. It's what they're going to do, but it's not. So
I just don't understand your comment.
essentially just the slides are not customized to the city. So when you get the study or the presentation, it goes through, like, the examples are not specific to the city because it's a generic, this is what a comp study does, and we're showing examples of what a comp study does, but it's not our information.
Specific to the city. So
Correct.
let me ask you this, when you say it's not specific to the city, so did you I know you looked at private as well, but did you look at the surrounding areas that had unionized employees? Did we compare those salaries?
Yeah, so it doesn't differentiate union and non-union. So when we look at the outside world, we don't say we only want to look at non-union
In
employers.
municipalities, you could actually look at union employees because they have a lot of union employees in the different municipalities as well.
Yes, we could. So like I said, the data doesn't differentiate if an employer, because it's not one specific employer. So it's not going to say Chase pays their accountants
You
this
saying
much
Chase,
money.
but I'm saying City of Rochester, City of Buffalo, City of
those,
whoever.
those are all encompassed in the database that we use to look at numbers. So.
Okay.
And Frank's handing out the presentation.
I have it.
Is it the same one?
Yeah.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, wait. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's all right. No,
Go
no,
ahead, go
that's
ahead.
fine. And now that you have it in front of you, I don't know if you want to take the time to flip through that, but so those first couple pages are, like I said, the specific breakdown of what we engage them for. The darker ones that have the staircase background are what a comp study truly is, but the data on there is not specified to us. It's the generic, what we do, what comp studies are, and how we conduct them. Then the last piece is the two deliverables that they delivered to us, which is a compensation policy, which is still in draft form. And then the last two pages are the pay grades that they created for us and the benchmarks for all of the jobs associated with those pay grades.
So can I ask you another question?
Absolutely.
So as I was reading through here, it was saying that some of the, I'm just, by verbatim, saying that some of the jobs you had to change them to get to where you were trying to get with the salary increase, the job titles.
Well, so I want to make it clear they're not salary increases. These are adjustments. But so to benchmark, that is correct. We didn't change titles, but what we needed to do, we needed to compare apples to oranges, essentially. And to do that is seemingly impossible. Prime example, how many commissioners of DPW are in the city of Syracuse?
I have no clue.
One. And they work for us. So how do you compare other commissioners of DPW in a city that has one?
So, okay, you're saying a city that has one. So when you looked at Rochester, right, let's say for argument's sake, they only have one commissioner? How many commissioners do they have?
Commissioner of Public Works, one.
Right, so Buffalo, how many?
One.
Okay, so that could be there's a comparison right there.
There is a comparison, but then you're also looking at revenue sizes. Like Rochester is 3 times our size. Buffalo, I don't even know how big Buffalo is. So to compare, it's still not apples to apples. And you look at Buffalo, their DPW commissioner also runs Parks and Rec. So we do compare it that way, but the other way we do it is not by saying, what title can we compare this to? That the way we do it is saying, okay, Commissioner of DPW, what do you do every day? What are the things that you're in charge of? And we go to the open market and say, regardless of your title, who does these things?
So is it fair to then say that the pay is based on job descriptions rather than titles?
Absolutely, 100%. Titles are essentially irrelevant.
So you interviewed everybody in every class?
So
I mean, you went from commissioner, then a deputy commissioner, then a superintendent, and you talked to everybody regarding, or this outfit did, or whoever did this. You interviewed everybody what their job duties are, because over the years, sometimes those duties change.
absolutely.
And if you're, it seems like if you're a superintendent or something like a supervisor, sometimes they add more duties onto you if you're especially effective.
Absolutely. So we did not engage all of the employees on the list. We engaged
I'm not talking about all the employees, all the titles.
all the titles. Yes, we engaged department heads and supervisors in those departments regarding all of the positions. Yes. And that's why it took 11 months to pull data.
You missed the city clerk over here.
What's that?
You missed the city clerk over here. And the deputy clerk is so.
Well, so they're not done yet. So all of that has not been established yet. That's why we're in the draft phase with President Hudson.
But you're not in the draft phase
We are.
with everybody else.
Correct. And everybody else was engaged. So the department heads that are in this room can acknowledge that they were given data.
I'm sure the department heads were. I'm just wondering if the other classes were engaged.
Supervisors were, yes.
Supervisors.
Yes.
Not everybody who's in the same class, management, it used to be called management confidential, was engaged. You're just
Correct.
talking about supervisors.
Correct. About the positions that report to them.
Oh, they were telling those people, they were telling you what those people do.
Right. So I went to supervisors and said, what do these people do? And we said, here is the job description per the county. And as we all agree and you're alluding to is that is not always accurate. So what else is missing from that job description that these people do for us that we need to accommodate. And that's what we took to the open
And talk
market.
to
No.
the people.
No.
And where I was going, right, I'm looking at, I don't even have a number on the page, but it says grade range. It says align jobs which are considered similar in terms of responsibilities and rank it. So you changed the jobs to rank it into
No, we
specific
didn't.
pay grades.
We didn't change any
Well,
jobs.
not the jobs, but the responsibilities.
No, we didn't change any jobs and responsibilities.
You added to them.
No. So again, we took a job description, which is not all encompassing, because anybody in this room will acknowledge that they don't. If we did what was on our job description, we'd work 4 hours a week. So we took job
Now,
descriptions.
you might, we wouldn't.
Well, the state writes our job description, so it's not conducive to what we actually do. So how do we fill the gap from what the state says we do and what we actually do? We compile all that data, and that's what we take to the outside market and say, somebody that does all of this, what do they make outside of here? Does that make more sense?
Did.
A little bit?
Yeah.
It's a very convoluted process. This process, we engaged them in September of last year. We just finished. So,
You said you matched descriptions accurately. You matched descriptions of other, like, people in Rochester, Buffalo, Albany.
everywhere,
No.
outside world, inside, like municipalities, everywhere.
So where'd you garner the information from somebody in Rochester who's got the same title as one of these people?
Well, most of these folks are they're union, and we
Well,
didn't do.
No, I'm talking about the non-union people that you decided they're going to be at this certain salary. Where did you talk to a similar person in Rochester?
We use a database.
Oh, database,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So we don't
Which
know
in-
what their duties are exactly.
No, we do. So the database is full, and that's why we take a job description, all the ancillary stuff, we blend that into one document. Then we go to this database that has national, local, we could narrow it down to a neighborhood in the city of Syracuse, and it says, here is somebody that does X, Y, and Z. We have somebody that does X, Y, and Z. The pay for that is this number. Correct. So that's how we compare a job to a job, but then looking at pay, there is a bell curve for compensation. People at the lowest are in the 10th percentile, are not making the most amount of money. Then there's the bell curve of 50%. The majority make this much money, and then there are some that make more. So then the compensation piece after comparing jobs is looking at where do we want to pay on that bell curve. So
So to Councilor Hogan's point, will there be job descriptions provided for everyone once?
So we have our job descriptions through New York State, and we're not allowed to change those.
Okay.
So civil service doesn't allow us to change those.
Okay.
Just so I'm informed here before I frame the rest of my questions. So we did not do a compensation study of any of the union workers.
That is correct.
Is
Correct.
there a plan to do that?
No, not at this point.
Why?
Because they are contractual. They negotiate for their wages every contract.
I think it would be beneficial for us to still have that information when we go into negotiations to know if we are.
I think it would be beneficial for the union to have them. I think we would benefit from it as well, but that's an expensive lift for. Okay, so that's kind of where it ends. So the last 2 pages are the pay grades assigned, so jobs with similar level responsibilities, and then the benchmarks for each of those jobs as to what the outside world is paying for that job, or that job description.
So let me go back to this question. You said that this is a draft. So if this is a draft, then why did you release it?
Which piece? So the policy is still in draft, which is the second from the last page is where it ends, but this piece here is still in draft, which is how do we maintain this going forward? The other pieces are not draft. I mean, the data is the data. That's not draft, but how we maintain it going
And I
forward
hear
is
you about
draft.
the data, but you know, all data can be manipulated.
100%.
So can you take us, can you give me an example here? So take a job description, pick a grade here, grade 10, start with information aid. Explain to me what the minimum, midpoint, maximum, and benchmark means on this chart.
Yeah, so the minimum, midpoint, and maximum on the grades are essentially saying that nobody in that classification of jobs, so those all have similar roles and responsibilities. Nobody should be making less than,
You didn't talk to any of them. They just, no information aides were talked to, right?
correct, their
You just-
supervisors
you
were
just
talked
depend on
to.
what the boss said with this particular.
Yes. I mean,
That's kind of normal though, right? Like, I don't think
it's
you're
more
supposed to
than
talk.
normal. Like, we were very generous with who we engaged in this study. Again, that's why it took us 11 months to do it, but we were very generous in who we engaged in this study. Because traditionally, it wouldn't go beyond a department head. It wouldn't even, I mean, traditionally, you don't even engage department heads. You're saying, what is the job description? And I'm paying to that.
Normal is,
So-
you know, all the way, I mean, this isn't normal. You've never done this before.
This is 100% normal. The whole world does
Well,
this except
no,
for
I'm
us.
saying we've never done this before.
We've never done it. Yeah, I mean,
This isn't normal for the city of
we're an
Syracuse.
outlier. Yes, we don't do what we traditionally haven't done what we're supposed to do.
Raises
Correct.
and things like that. So there'll be no discretionary wages from now on, correct?
No, so this is a reset button. So this pays for the job, not the people in the job. So this doesn't take into consideration your years of experience, your education, how you're performing, any of that. This is saying, as an information aide, you should be making, it's essentially setting minimum wage for our jobs, is what it's doing. Beyond that, if we say, Counselor Hogan, you're a rock star, we want to give you more money, that's discretionary increases. But discretionary increases are not for adjustments to a salary because the job itself is underpaid. So this is strictly for the job, not for the people in the jobs.
I would just say, I mean, I don't want to hype interviews too much because I think if your pay depends on listing how many different things you do in your interview, you're going to list every single thing. You do it once a year, you're going to throw it in there, right? So I think it's an important piece of it. I think you're right to do it, but I don't want to say, you know, you got to interview everyone because then why would you not list every single thing you've ever done anyway? But
That's more than correct, thank you.
But, you know, when you get rid of steps, because that's what you did, right?
Yep. For paid pursuant, which is
And I
not a
just
real
know-
classification. Paid pursuant, which is not a, like, the rest of the world doesn't have anything called paid pursuant. That's not a normal classification.
What I'm saying is that if somebody's got 25, I know how the city works, having been here a long time. Sometimes certain titles take on more jobs and duties because of the person in that title,
Absolutely.
because of longevity usually, like Margaret here. So, you know, I mean, that sort of is ameliorated by having steps.
Yes and no. I mean, steps are more so longevity than,
If you figure you've been here long enough and you've done enough,
In
you're gonna
theory-
stick around, right?
but that's, I mean, we're moving away from in theory, moving to fact-based decision
That's
making.
sort
So
of fact-based in my experience.
So if somebody's taking on more responsibilities, their job title should change as well. We can't assign more work to somebody in the same title.
Correct.
It's, you know, against civil service
I think
law.
to Councilor Monto's point, you know, these duties are all defined. If somebody's exceeding their duties, then they're say, hey, this isn't in my privy anymore, right?
also, that's why we engage department heads, because if anybody's assigning work, it should be department heads. So if people are doing work that's not assigned by their department heads, I mean, that's unfortunate, and we should move them away from that, yes, that they're not doing work that they're assigned to be done. So, I mean,
Would you know that?
how would we know that? By having employees engage us.
Or let me just ask this question, assigning people to do jobs that they're not qualified to do, and they're
Correct.
telling people that they're not qualified? but they're still doing it, and that's been done by department heads.
Correct, and that should not be done.
But then what happens is that now, because I got a call, I'm just gonna put it out there. And the person, he was given this job that was not in this classification, and now he's in jeopardy because either he's gotta take a lower paying job or find something else to do, and I don't think that's very fair.
I mean, I wish Governor Hochul were sitting right here because I'd tell her to abolish civil service law. I can't fight New York State. It's unfortunate. I agree 100%. I think civil
Get
service
that,
law is
but what about
an
that
abomination.
employee? What about that employee?
I cannot break the law for the employee. That's the downside. I wish I could. I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think that's wrong for the employee, but there's
2.5 years, he's been doing a job that compensated him, now he's gotta turn around and take a lesser job that doesn't compensate him the same.
New York State law. There's no other answer. The New York State says that's what I have to do. That's what I have to do.
Circle back to my actual question.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah, can you just take us through a pay grade, the minimum, maximum, and
Sorry. So
That's okay.
the minimum, maximum. So like I started to say, essentially what you're doing is establishing a minimum wage for that group of jobs. So we were talking about pay grade 10, correct? So pay grade 10, these folks all have similar job responsibilities. So we are saying as a city, nobody in that job should be making less than $30,253 a year. The midpoint is not quite the average, but realistically where most of these jobs should be falling. Starting, correct. And then the maximum is nobody doing those job responsibilities should be making more than that much money. And because to the point, if they are doing more than that, they either get reclassified per civil service law and move into a different title, or they're doing work outside of their title and they should not be doing it. It needs to be reassigned, and we need to manage the expectations that somebody that is in that title is doing that work.
the benchmark number is what?
The benchmark number is what the outside world says we should be paying for that job.
So none of, going to the, are you, okay. With the benchmark, so none of them go to the maximum, of course. They're usually between the minimum and midpoint, somewhere in there. So what's the plan to sustain the increases as they will?
So increases is,
Sustainable solution to continue to,
yep, so the policy that's right before this piece is kind of that. Not kind of, it's exactly that. How do we make sure that this is sustainable and that we can continue to make it equitable, transparent? And to your point about the maximum, yes, we don't want people at the maximum because that is where,
grow.
correct,
Yeah.
that's where discretionaries come into place, COLAs, if we do a cost of living adjustment, all of that factors in. So those grades will move eventually, but not each year. So we are working with the consultant to say, okay, how often do the minimum, midpoint, and maximum move? And if that's every 3 years, then every 3 years we adjust that accordingly. And that, to your point, gives people the opportunity to grow in that range.
So if we come short, hopefully not, right? God forgive, forbid that. But if we did, then what do we do? Start eliminating positions?
If we come short, so I mean, ultimately, this back of the napkin math, this is less than $500,000 annually compounding. So, I mean, it's not an absurd amount of money that we are looking at. I mean, we've got plenty of room in the budget to make sure we can afford a compounding $500,000 budget.
Let me ask you this, right? Because I know that there's some people that did not get any of the increase. And could you
That's correct.
explain why that is?
Because they're currently paid above the benchmark rate. So folks that are, a lot of them were receiving steps and some were just paid, I don't know how, we didn't really have an established pay practice before, so it was kind of throwing darts at the wall. And if that dart landed above your benchmark, then you didn't get an adjustment, and you won't get an adjustment until your number aligns with the benchmark.
And before we move to further from it, Councilor Hogan was asking about the discretionary raises. There will be a review and process attached to that, right?
Correct. It's
not just one
performance-based.
person making that decision.
Correct.
Procedurally, if like the unions negotiate for 2 or 3% raise, would, traditionally, management would follow that. They'd get 2 or 3%.
Traditionally, no. I mean, well, define traditionally. How long are we talking? For the last 10 years, no.
Well, I'm talking, I mean, they used to be able to get, they used to get the same sort of raise that the CSEA got.
Up until the 2010, yes. And then from 2010
gone,
on,
right?
nothing happened. Correct.
So in other words, somebody who's in one step, like who's been there for 10 or 15 years, somebody new coming in gets the same salary that that person gets?
Currently,
Yeah.
yes, this pays to the job, not the people. Yep. So, and that will change over time when we start, when we haven't done a first round of discretionary increases yet. So if somebody,
Would the discretionary increases be along the whole title, or it'd be just one person or?
no, because that's, so like I said, this establishes what the job pays. Discretionaries establish what the person in the job gets paid. So if you are outperforming your peers, then starting end of this year, if we do discretionaries this year, it's at the discretion of the mayor. If he chooses to do discretionary increases this year, by this time next
Or
year.
determined by the commissioner who knows exactly what their duties are.
No, the commissioner
Nothing,
has nothing to do with discretionary increases. They can put in a recommendation, but that's it. And it goes to the senior level staff to make a determination if that gets paid or not.
That's what the review process is.
Correct. And that's a 2.5 month long process. So at this point, correct, that if you start today and somebody with less experience starts today, they're qualified for the job. That's not up for debate. They're qualified for the job, but you might have 15 years and it requires 5. That job pays the same. Next year, after discretionary increases or after a few rounds of discretionary increases, the benchmark may adjust slightly, but it won't go up. But in theory, if you're performing, you would be higher than somebody just coming in the door. So we're moving towards a performance-based and not necessarily just you've been here and you get paid for that.
But never getting above maximum.
Never getting above maximum in that pay grade. Because again, if you're above the maximum, and there's scientific, like Mark DeRicki could explain that number, there's a return on that number that you need to calculate, but they should never be above that maximum because they're either doing the wrong work and we need to manage that, or they're doing work that they should be reclassified for and moved into another job.
So can a new hire be hired, okay, let me see how I say this, a little bit before, above the benchmark, and then you freeze that until they catch up with that? Am I making sense?
It used to happen,
Oh,
but now we shouldn't be hiring above the benchmark because we're saying that's what the job pays, and we're not taking into consideration your experience. We're taking into consideration you're qualified for this job, that's what the job pays. So it's, again, establishing that minimum wage. Everybody comes in at that minimum wage. And then going forward, if you're performing, then yes, you are eligible to go above that number, not to exceed, and not necessarily just the maximum. There's internal workings of how far you can get to, or how close you can get to that maximum. But yes,
so employees evaluations to determine that will be on a yearly basis?
yep, it's every year. The
Do we do that
payment.
now?
Yep, we've been doing it for a couple of years now, and the payment, it's determined by the mayor if he wants to establish, like he could say, we're not doing discretionaries this year because we've already spent this money. And that's well within his right. If he chooses to have discretionaries, we go through a process where we evaluate and we essentially do a performance review of all of these folks and then assign accordingly.
so there's no concern like, I'm just, because we have, obviously professional people like the engineering folks or legal secretaries, somebody comes in new, gets the same salary as somebody for 10, 15 years. And there's no concern that that person's saying, well, heck with this. We're trying to retain people. Heck with this. I'm going to walk down the street and get $20,000 more a year at Barclay and Damon.
So at this point, yes, they're getting the same pay, but again, that's where performance comes in. And chances are they're not going to go get 20K more at Barclay and Damon because we're paying to the midpoint.
I deal with Barclay and Damon
So-
in my other job, and they pay pretty well.
And there's always going to be somebody that pays more than us. I mean, that's the way the world works. There's always going to be a bigger fish that pays more money, but these wages are competitive
But the
for
whole
the job.
thing was for us to be at sort of a level where we could retain people, right?
Correct, we're
I mean, that was
competitive.
the idea, the strategy behind it.
Yes.
So if we're paying the title, not the person, are we in a situation right now, in any case, where we are paying people on this list, non-union, more than we are paying somebody in the same job title that is union?
I mean, I'd welcome so there are some that cannot be part of the union because same titles, but cannot be part of the union. And realistically, if I look at this quickly, it would be grade 10.
Confidential staff inside of this.
Correct.
So they're not doing the same job, really, they're doing a different job because of the confidentiality.
There is, it's mostly the same job, but there is another aspect of confidentiality that those folks have.
So should that be a different job description?
Could be, we're again limited by New York State and what we can and can't do to change those titles.
And so in those 10s, I think when I looked at it, it was, well, I think it was one person that actually received a step up out of all of the ones there. Why?
So, oh, you're saying of all the 10s, one person received an adjustment? That's because they've been getting steps for however long they've been here. And so their salary was increasing, and it was those steps moved them above what the market says we should pay them.
I just guess I'm confused because we've been doing this so much that I'm looking at this and I'm still perplexed. Because, you know, I've seen 3 different matrix, and in each matrix, there was a attached to each one of them.
I'm not sure where this is the document we use. So I'm
This
being.
may be the document you use, but let's be perfectly frank. Let's don't do that. Me, you, and Frank sat in that office. We looked at a matrix that was totally different from this one. So let's don't do that.
It was broken out. Each one was broken out. Yes, we did the same thing with departments.
President Hudson, it was not totally different. It was.
It was totally different, Frank, because I looked at the numbers when you had the council attached to it. There's a
Right.
whole $7,000 difference there now.
There were changes. There were some isolated changes that were made after we reviewed it, and we offered to review the final version with you. But there were not wholesale changes to this document. This has been the working matrix with some small adjustments, half a dozen, maybe, but this has been the working matrix. We did at one point cut out and isolate and send you just a piece of this, but when you asked for the whole version, this is what you received. Absolutely.
But again, I hear what you're saying. If this is what we receive now. I've seen 3 different things.
No, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to disagree.
Well, we'll agree to disagree because
We'll
I
have
saw
to.
the numbers and I saw what it said
There
across the board.
were some changes. Absolutely. There were some isolated changes in this matrix, but by and large, this is the same matrix that we've shared all along.
This is a working document. This document is going to forever change. And so to Frank's point, those changes, we're never going to move information aid to grade 160. That's not the changes we're looking at. But this is a living document that we need to maintain. And there will be small adjustments through the time, but for the most part, this is the document, and this is the document we've been sharing.
So the small adjustment, and I'm just going to stick with my colleagues. So the small adjustment added up to $5,000 difference from the first thing I saw.
Okay. So Correct. And there was a request to do that.
For us. Oh, okay. What else you got?
No, I'm just thinking that, I don't know, I'd see Councilor Green on this, because he's got more experience in this, but I mean, is this more or less, this is sort of a boilerplate, or would you, I mean, how much did this cost us? Because it's sort of like it's sort of like a boilerplate to me.
It's
you know,
not a
I read this thing
boilerplate.
2 times, and I expected things to jump out at me, but it's like something,
11
to me,
months
it's
to do
sort of
this.
predetermination here.
It's not a predetermination at all. I'm not sure how we're drawing that conclusion that it's a predetermination.
It's a conclusion I draw. Sometimes I don't
presentation-
draw the same conclusion other people do, but it's.
The presentation is 100%. I mean, the presentation's a boilerplate. This is how comp studies are done. I won't argue with that there. What we did is not boilerplate. Let's throw this same thing we did for Chase at the wall and make it stick. That's not at all what we
You don't think this has been
did.
presented to similar cities, the same type of thing? I mean,
I guarantee you the ones on this page have been presented to 1 million people. But to my point, it is not this presentation is not about the city of Syracuse. This presentation is about compensation studies, and compensation studies should not change, nor do they, because when you do a comp study, you do it step by step every single time. So yes, you can say, just like anything else, basic arithmetic, if I told you this is how we do addition, you take the first number and you add it to the second number, that presentation is not going to change.
you drum the uniqueness of the city out of this, basically.
Out of the
Of
presentation,
these, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, it's just like, we could be anywhere.
Correct, because the comp study should be done the same way. But the results are not in any way canned. Those results are hundreds of hours of Margaret, myself, my team sitting down with a consultant, going through job descriptions line by line and going through notes from department heads and supervisors line by line and making sure we accommodate for every little thing people do and matching that against the outside world. That is not canned. That's hundreds of hours of work that I put into this project. But the presentation on how a comp study should be done, yes, is very much canned, because a comp study should be done the same way every single time.
I'd love to see a job description for a district counselor.
They'd have to talk to us about it. They didn't talk to us about it, so.
Because I have to guess that it's nowhere near what we actually deal with on a daily basis.
Correct. And that's why when we did this, we said New York State writes our job descriptions. Problematic. So if we, to Mike Green's point, or Councilor Green's point, if this were in the outside world, we would say the job description is correct. You do what the job description says. That's what the consultant gets, and that's what we pay to. We understand that we are fundamentally different because there's somebody else writing our job descriptions, and you are not doing what's on that job description. So that's why we took the time to engage department heads, supervisors, to make sure that we weren't missing anything, because we cannot write our own job descriptions.
I do think we have to fix that, or figure out a way to make it so a person in the same exact job title that is union versus non-union, that description is different, or the title is different. Figure out a way to do that, because I look at it like if you're saying we're paying the title, not the person, that's not really the case here. There's some union members that are getting paid less just because they're a union member.
Correct. And
Unless you roll in the confidential piece of it, which is really not in the description, right?
I'm not sure if that's in the description. I don't know if Margaret can speak to that, but correct. So
Margaret, is
there,
it?
So no, not in
Okay.
these specific titles.
So it's not the same title then, it's a different title.
correct. In total, there's not, like, we're not talking about hundreds of employees in those roles. We're talking about
One's enough for me.
One's enough, correct.
I don't care if it's hundreds.
But
One's
again,
enough.
we're looking at so I have to now navigate civil service law. If it were internal and this were private sector, I'd say 100%, let's change it right now. It makes sense. You should not be working a non-union title or a union title as a non-union employee, period. New York State doesn't see it that way. New York State says these are the rules of civil service. You got to follow them whether they make sense or not. And that's the world I have to live in. So I agree with you 1,000%, but I am still constricted by New York State law on public sector employment.
Well, you can abolish one title and create another one.
So when we go to the county, when we create a title, it goes through the county, who goes to the state. We tell them what the job duties are, and they tell us what the title is.
which is what we've been doing, and we get the same results. So it
That's how we get our titles. right?
yes.
Okay. So we create the duties and then they give us the title.
And they say this is close enough, that's where it belongs.
Sometimes they create a new title. If it's different enough, if it's unique enough, we'll have a unique title, but that's not always the case.
So before we move on, Nadar, is there anything you would like to add?
He know that. He know that. Why you sitting there? Let's go.
Get the old man up here, right?
Now you got to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Ada Maroon, the city auditor until December 31st. It seems to me that I understand the dilemma with the civil service component of this, but, and you've mentioned this in the past, what are we going to do about that issue? You say it's the governor or the CSEA guidelines, but there has to be something done about that as municipalities across the state, number one, I would think. Correct?
Yeah, we're not the only ones struggling with civil service law.
Precisely. So what are we doing to address that component of it?
The state doesn't want to hear that we should essentially eliminate thousands of jobs.
Well, you don't want to get rid of the unions.
No, I'm not saying unions. I'm talking strictly
civil-
civil service law.
Right.
Should be abolished. It's horrendous to say that somebody may or may not qualify, and we don't get to determine that. As an HR professional, I do not get to tell New York State who an HR professional is. They have somebody sitting at a desk saying that is or is not an HR professional with zero understanding of how and what we do and what that person's required to do.
Correct.
And then to say that we all can sit and pass standardized testing to perform in a job, I think is fundamentally wrong. But I do not have any say in civil service law. And to tell New York State that we shouldn't have it is barking up a tree that they're not going to listen to the guy in Syracuse.
I know President Hudson has reached out to other municipalities to have this conversation to move forward to that. That's number one. Number two, the point that I think Councilor Hogan was bringing up, and one that maybe because I am old, I always refer to this too, the institutional knowledge component of that is something that the municipality counts on, historically has counted on here, at least in my experience from when I started here in mid-'80s. So it just seems to me, how are we acknowledging that for the employees? When you say, so somebody comes in, they've been here, a new person starts today, but the person who's been 15 years in that job is going to be same, and you're saying that there's no movement on it because the benchmark is whatever it is, the ceiling, I guess, for all practical purposes. And one of the points that Councilor Hogan also raised was part of this was for retention purposes.
Correct.
So how are you addressing that component of it? Because you've spoken about that since you've been here.
Correct. And so again, there is a fundamental difference between the starting point and where we're going to be in 5 years or next year, quite frankly, in February. Where we are now and where we'll be. If somebody with institutional knowledge, that's great. If they're not performing, then they may stay where they are. If they're performing and they're performing the way we need them to, that's where discretionary increases come in play, where you will now start to separate the performers and the people that have longevity and the people that are performing from the people coming into the job. But to establish that at the baseline is impossible. To Councilor Hogan's point, I would have had to interview every single person and figure out everything they've ever done for the city, and we would have been kicking this can to 2035 to even establish a baseline. So we're establishing the baseline, the bare minimum. From there, we have programs in place. To the next steps are to start to differentiate performers from non-performers, and institutional knowledge and education levels and all of those things, and reward those folks for that.
I guess my last point is that, first of all, I appreciate the work that you and your team have done and the commitment by the administration to do this. Long overdue, in my humble opinion. Secondly, I would say that I'm still confused, as President Hudson said, in terms of what is draft and what isn't draft. Before you answer me, so it just seems to me that there are gray areas for some people who are non-represented, that there is some confusion still there for those individuals. So the union has all the unions have a set contract, which we've just done for all of the unions.
Correct.
This past year. So is there any value, in your opinion, to look at that going forward in terms of having some discussion with non-represented individuals, that how they fit into this whole new matrix?
You mean represented employees?
Unrepresented employees.
So we did the unrepresented.
In what capacity?
That's all
Just
the
talking to
non-union
supervisors.
folks. Yes.
Right. So what I'm saying is, in the retention mentality, beyond the supervisors, is there anything that could be done to have those discussions with those employees?
Yeah, so we've had open door for the last, I mean, it was supposed to be a handful of days. It turned into 3 weeks of open door communications on top of letters and things that went out to the employees. Were absolutely open door communication policy with them, and we've established essentially office hours for people to come in and talk explicitly about comp. But to your point about the little bit of ambiguity that we do have a little bit of ambiguity right now, but
Correct. That's what I'm
what
trying
we
to
had
articulate.
before
I
was
do well.
totally ambiguous. There was no rhyme or reason to anything we did before. So to say that we have one policy that's still currently in draft because we have to recognize some discrepancies in that policy is far better than your salary is $65,000, which is what seemingly happened before. There was a void of nobody understands it, nobody wants to know, and we just guess, and hopefully it's the right guess. So
There's not an argument there. Excuse me for interrupting. There's not an argument there. Establishing that benchmark is desirable going forward, no question about it. But I said, is bringing everybody along in that process is, I guess, the part that I think is still somewhat missing from at least what I've heard today.
Yes.
And so, and you're saying you're making a commitment to continue to work on that on behalf of those employees.
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a couple follow-up points. We did largely undertake this because we knew that we were losing employees. We were unable to retain and in many cases attract, particularly in professional areas. So, Councilor Hogan, to your point, we have probably saved at least 3 reasonably highly placed professionals since the comp study took place. We significantly raised, you mentioned legal just as an example, I get it, but it is a good example. We significantly raised the benchmark on legal positions. We had lawyers that were making less than secretaries in many cases. So we significantly raised those. We had a number of folks come to us and say, if you hadn't done that, I had a foot out the door. I was already ready to accept another job. We lost some financial professionals who got exhausted during the 11 months and didn't want to wait for this anymore. So it isn't perfect, but it is definitely helping us with professional retention. It does put everybody in those jobs in the same boat, which is difficult. That's a bitter pill. When you hit the reset button, everybody resets. And you know, I've only been doing this job for 4 years, and somebody could conceivably have been doing it for 10, and should they have gotten a different number at the end of the reset? Sure, you can absolutely make that argument. The reality is, and this is the hardest part, but the reality is what the reset button did was establish a replacement cost. If the mayor needed to replace Rick or Margaret or any of the other non-union positions tomorrow, what would he have to go out and pay in the marketplace to do that job? Forget the person who was doing it. Forget the fact that they'd been here for 15 years and they had that institutional knowledge. You can't always pay for that. If you're going to fill that position tomorrow, what's the replacement cost? So if you look at that matrix, you look at those benchmarks, that's what you're looking at. What's the replacement cost for that position today? It's not going to be the same a year from now. But that's what that replacement cost is today. Thanks.
So before we close the meeting, I would like to give an opportunity. We have have some representatives here from the unions that would like to say a few words.
My name's Jeff Kohansky. I'm the superintendent of the sewer department. There's a few issues. I'm just going to try and keep it short. I don't begrudge anybody getting money, getting pay raises. They deserve it by all means. Okay. Now I've been in the sewer department for 30 years. Okay. And the number of employees we have are going down. I got 3 people leaving my department this week because they're going to have to go outside to get paid more money per hour for the job that they do. Okay, just simply driving trucks or whatever. All right, they're leaving my departments. I've talked to you, Margaret, about a pay raise for my masons, which you pay masons in the skilled trades $39 an hour. You hold my masons to the same job specs, but you pay them $20 an hour. I don't think it's fair. It needs to be changed. As far as the negotiation of contracts, I was on a contract committee for our union. With this here, you said it took 11 months. So to me, you didn't negotiate our contract in good faith because you said, okay, well, we're going to give you guys 5, 5, or 3, 3, and 3. And then here we are now. You're saying you're going to go by what the outside public or whatever gets paid. I don't think that was right either.
Without being disrespectful,
No, I get it. I'm going to listen. I'm learning what you're telling me.
with the union, not with us.
Oh, no, because we sat down and we discussed it, and we were told by your committee that, let me finish, that, no, this is the best we can do, we can't do any more for you. That's what we were told over and over and over again. Okay. So now you're coming over here and giving people pay well-deserved? Not saying they don't, but you went and did this for them. Well, why didn't you do this for us before we got done contract negotiations with our contract?
Because that's how negotiations work.
So then these people didn't have to negotiate nothing. You just automatically gave them.
These people are not represented. These people do not have somebody to stand up for them saying, I don't make enough money.
Okay.
And that you get that opportunity every time a contract opens. You get that opportunity. These people for 10 plus years have not had a single adjustment to their comp. And I'm not saying
what you did for them is wrong. I'm not. I really am not.
Right.
What I'm saying, I've been here for 30 years. We were told, I've been on several contract negotiations. No. Okay, but now you go out and find money for non-union employees to give them money. Why in our contract negotiations said, no, we can't do that, we can't do this, we can't do that. Now, you also gave mechanics in the garage automatic pay increases outside of the contract. Why can't you do that for all local 400 members?
Because this, again, you're looking at market data. If we want to take monies out of contracts and pay to market data, that's a different story. But to say you want to negotiate it and you want the data, it doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. So,
well, you got employees, like I said, my thing with the Mason things, you got Masons that work for the city of Syracuse, make $39 an hour in buildings and skills trades. My Masons were held to the same job specs.
100%. So
why aren't they being paid that money?
Will your president allow you to make an MOU for those Masons?
I mean, sure they will, but I mean, at the point,
if that's the
I
case,
can't
let's do
get
it.
a Mason job to fill the job because no one's going to come here for $20 an hour that meets those job specs.
I understand that, but
So my department's got to suffer work-wise because I don't have a Masons to do the job.
right. So again, we're open to that. I'm not anti-union by any stretch. I'm not anti, but what we can't do is if we say Masons are underpaid, then we go to the union and say, let's create an MOU. And they say, no, we want that $10 bump for everybody. That's not reasonable. So if you want to create an MOU, we'll sign it. We understand that. We did it with mechanics, to your point. We are willing to do that. But to say it's across the board because the job title you just said, what was it? Masons are getting paid more and we want that as well. That we can't do. But MOUs, we get it. We understand. If we want to pay to a reasonable number, we will help do that. But it can't be across the board because, again, the difference between this and the negotiation is for everybody. This is saying there were a lot of people that didn't get money. The union's not going to do that, right? So if we want to pay to this, that's a different story. We can make that happen, but it can't be this plus negotiated.
I heard a lot of rumblings, obviously, my ears to the ground. I started as a local 400 as a sewer maintenance worker. I did masonry work 15 years, drove plows, everything like that. A lot of disgruntled I'm getting from all the employees that why they're leaving, and it's going to be, come November, you're going to have exodus probably 10 times more than what we're talking right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because people are not, they can go elsewhere and get paid more money an hour. So you need to address that pretty soon.
And again, I mean, I think that's a totally fair statement. I agree with you 100%. But if the unions want to sit down and figure something out, we can absolutely do that.
And that's
cannot
what I
be
would
both.
seriously suggest, that we sit down and try to figure something out when
So-
it comes to the unions.
So if we want to pay
I'm not here
market
for
rates,
myself. I could, I'm at the end of my career. I'm, the sun's going this way. So I'm here for my guys, local 400 members, where I started. They deserve to get fair wage, which they're not getting now.
fair.
And the
I
city
agree
is
with you
suffering
on
itself.
that, right? But what I want to find out, maybe Margaret, one of you can tell us, how much of a loss are we seeing in these different departments, in Sinai, in water, in these departments?
A lot. But it's not just here, it's across the board. It's the entire city is seeing a loss in productivity because of loss of jobs.
I understand
Or
that,
exodus
but-
from jobs, not loss of jobs.
I mean, here, you agree that this municipality is lower paid than the majority of municipalities in the state.
I mean, I wouldn't agree to that, but I would say, it all depends on,
Just this, okay, in Onondaga County
I mean, we can't,
and the county, is that the city of Syracuse employees are the same job titles as they are getting
Correct.
paid less money than the county, say.
the county is a multi-billion-dollar
I'm
business.
not asking that. I'm asking, do they get paid less money to work here than they do there to do the same job?
Absolutely, yes. But again, the county is a multi-billion-dollar company.
I know, I've been in
We're
the city for
not
15
even
years.
a
I
200,
think
we're a
that's
$300
Something we're
million
gonna have to
company.
come together on. I think we're gonna have to have a conversation and keep
Listen, I don't
having
want
these
to do what you
conversations.
guys did, that's fine, and
No,
there are a lot of employees, like, where'd she go, Robin, and the girls in my office that do way above what they used to do, and they need all to be compensated for what they do. Like I said, 8 years ago, in that office, the front office, was probably 10 to 12 people there. Now we have 5 or 6 doing the same job. So, obviously, these people are doing more work
I
than
would
they
be
did 5 years ago.
curious. I want to see
Thank you
our
very much.
deficit
All right.
in employees. I would like to see the number lost across
That's the
board.
technology we're trying to put in place. It's, I mean, all of this runs together. So that technology is what we're missing. That data is not easy to pull. It's not something we can, like, with the technology that we're trying to put in place, it will make all of this uber transparent because we can pull it real time right now. This is what it says. But I mean, I can start to ask IT if they can pull that together for us, but it's not something we can see in real time. And by the time we get it, it's going to be outdated.
So, okay, so we can't go across departments and find out how big of a work loss we've had with our employees.
No, because we don't have a position, we don't have any way to manage our positions, which means without knowing the true positions, how do you know how many people were supposed to be in those positions? So in theory, we could guesstimate, but at best, that's what it is, and is a guess.
Because we know the numbers, right? We kind of know previous years, what we had in Sinai, what we had in water, what we had in those departments. So is it 75% lower? Is it, how much?
That's what I mean. We could guess, and it's definitely lower, but to put actual numbers to it would require either a heavy lift from IT to try to pull some sort of reporting or an estimate.
Do you want to say a comment before we finished?
Please. My name is Chuck Gafrancesco. I'm president of 1773 Foreman's Union. But when we do negotiations and we look across the table and we hear the words, there's just no more, over and over again, there's just no more. As union presidents, one of the things that we have to do is go back and talk to our employees. Do we try to sell it to them when we're convinced this is the best deal we can get? Yeah, right? And then shortly after, we're surprised by you guys wanting to raise one title, only one. 2 titles, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. 2 titles, both of the same thing. and they were mechanics and heavy equipment mechanic crew leaders, okay? You raised them by a considerable amount of money. That did not sit well with our union members, not one bit.
Right.
Considering we have people that work at the DPW who are getting public assistance. We have municipalities that surround us that are making more money. Town of Salina is hiring laborers at $26 an hour. The traffic signal foreman for the city of Syracuse makes $25.
Correct. And again, if we look at the fundamentals of the town of Salina versus the city, there is different, I mean, it's taxes, right?
But you found money for yourselves. Why wasn't this study done for all of the employees?
So, because there is a negotiated, again, to my point with
Syracuse
Jeff.
Housing Authority, they studied everyone.
Okay,
But why can't the city of Syracuse do that?
we could.
Then I think
But
further discussions need to happen. People are leaving left and right.
I don't disagree with you.
And departments are falling apart right now.
Chuck, to my point, the union did not want to adjust two jobs, right? So if we want to be paid to the market, we can do that, but we get paid to the market. You cannot get paid to the market and negotiate those rates. So which one do we want? Is the real question.
You brought up them to the market, the two that you bumped then.
Okay, so but not everybody will be brought to market. Or people might be above market. What are we going to do then? And because then negotiations don't matter because we're paying what the market pays. So what do we want? Do we want to be paid what the market themes, or do we want to negotiate? Because we can take comp out of salary negotiations and pay to the market. That's fair.
Okay.
But that means we pay to the market, not negotiate.
Is that another meeting to just?
Okay, no, I think that, yeah, you guys need to have a sit down and.
I agree 100%. We need to talk again, maybe about opening contracts, creating MOAs, whatever we need to do.
Right, that's a discussion I
Because we
think
are
you guys
losing
need to
people left and right.
have.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Last one.
I'll try not to take too much time. I'm Darcy Bergen. I am first VP of Local 834 CSEA for the county, former CSEA Unit 7801 for the city of Syracuse president. You talk about these studies. We brought a study to our negotiations. And in fact, the gentleman that left here was in our negotiations on his cell phone and his tablet the whole time. How disrespectful. We brought that study that CSEA did to bring us fair living wages. CSEA has many, many members that are receiving government assistance. I, of one, just had to apply to the state because I'm raising my grandson. Do you know how that makes me feel, that I've been here for 10 years? And now all of a sudden you're giving these people increases that don't know how to do their job. You have duplicated titles that you raised your people up with, but the unions don't get that even though they're the same titles, and you're talking about civil service job descriptions. How can you do that? You say the other ones were not represented, but they were CSEA pursuant, so what we got, they got. So they were represented.
They should
Now
not
you
have
took
been.
it all away from them.
Correct. They should not be represented. They're not paying union dues. They're not part of the union.
Titles that you're now giving them major
They're not
increases for,
duplicate
and ours
title.
aren't.
So
They're not-
Darcy,
Information
Darcy,
aid, administrative aid, and an administrative assistant.
So grade 10, yes, there are duplicate titles because they cannot be part of the union because of the information that they have.
When we took that
Okay,
study,
okay. So
Mr.
this
Kaliba
is the-
came back and gave us $3.85 biweekly for one grade. How is that supposed to be negotiated?
I don't understand. The
Darcy,
grades
this
were
is a very
negotiated.
important discussion.
I know,
But
I'm
we need
losing
to
it.
have this discussion offline, yes.
Right.
So
And
we
so-
are going to finish this meeting and then we'll schedule something that we can all talk about
Thank
this.
Right, so
Okay.
you guys can talk about, I don't know what you call them, Rich, MOUs, MOAs, MO whatever they are. So, yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.